So, want to welcome you all to our second Sunbelt Spotlight. Today our speaker is Jeff Moore. And Jeff Moore is the owner and operator of Solana Succulents. And he's the author of 4 succulent books, one of which, they're nice, big, beautiful coffee table succulent books. So I'm going to turn this over to Jeff.
Okay.
And
thank you, Rebecca. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hope you're all unmuted so I can hear you. If you have questions, just chirp in anytime. I've only done a few Zoom meetings, and all the ones I've done so far have been me talking along with the PowerPoint. This will be different. We're going to walk around the nursery, and I'm going to show you some plants, ask questions as we go, and then I'll end up back here. I'll build a little dish garden for you. So let's start real quickly. I'm going to leave my sunglasses on. Maybe it's rude I'm wearing them, but the sun just broke out here on the coast. So we're going to take a little tour of the nursery. As the name implies, Solana Succulents means I'm in Solana Beach. I've been here for 28 years, and I've been doing books for about the last 6. So hopefully you're all getting a feel of maybe what the nursery looks like. And one thing people are amazed, they show up here and they don't look up. But if you look up,
wow,
I've got some giant euphorbias here. That's 28 years worth of growth from a 4-foot plant I brought in initially trying to sell. This is a close-up of the trunk. It actually looks like a tree. It's called Euphorbia abyssinica. So that gives you a little idea of how long I've been here. So what I carry is common stuff and a lot of rare and unusual things. And if I zip by something here and anyone has a particular question about it, let me know. I'm just going to tell you about a few plants as we go here. This is the feather cactus, Mammallaria plumosa, a white one. That probably is a 20 or 30-year-old plant, believe it or not, to be that big. There's no rhyme or reason to my shop. I just pack the plants in here. I wish I had an aloe section and an agave section and a cactus section, but I don't. Inventory is coming and going all the time. This is the elephant's foot, Bocaria recurvata, a very old. It just finished blooming. It had a beautiful flower on it. And let me know if my signal gets weak. So here's more of a pulled back view. Am I aiming the computer right? Do you see the size of that euphorbia back there?
yes.
Yeah, it's a monster. It's about 25, 30 feet high, and it's almost 20 feet across too. It's never leaving here except in pieces. I have a lot of large euphorbias that were initially brought in order to sell when they were small, but they became permanent real estate over time. Here's a rare plant, a Bombax ellipticum. I sell 99% succulents. This is not a cactus. I'd say it's 90% succulents, 10% cactus, although I do love the cactus too. That's a Bombax ellipticum. It's sort of a bonsai type succulent. There's a mutated plant called the Wondrous Cirrus peruvianus, tree aloe, Aloe dichotoma. I want to show you, this is a terrestrial bromeliad called a hectia. It's a hectia, I think Aztec sun is the name of that. They're semi-succulent plants. More giant euphorbias. I have no shortage of those. And I do want to show you, here's a nice purple prickly pear called the Puntia macrocentra. We try to use the Latin whenever we can. Common name are prickly pears, but we try to use the Latin in both names so we're talking about the right plant. The big spiny thing here, I should show you this. Those of you familiar with the desert, you know what ocotillos are. Well, people confuse this plant here, and the sun's in the way. Let me walk over here. People confuse this with an ocotillo, and it's sometimes called the false ocotillo, but it's a totally different plant from Madagascar called Aloe procera. It has an ocotillo-like shape, but it grows much better for us here on the coast than the true ocotillos grow, although they do grow fine in San Diego too.
Hi, Jeff.
Yeah.
Andrew asked, do you do hybrids or crossbreeding of plants as well?
Myself, no. I'm not a good propagator. I grow stuff from seed occasionally, but I'm not one of the mad scientists that comes up with hybrids and crosses, but I know a lot of them. So a lot of what I bring in are hybrids and cultivars. For example, this little flat right here, those are little hybrid aloes, miniature aloes done by Kelly Griffin and Karen Zimmerman and some others that are really good at doing that. Those don't exist in nature, but we have them here in cultivation. So I don't consider myself a real propagator. I'm more of an enthusiast nursery owner. I have grown from seed and came up with some unusual things, but nothing that I've grown on to sell as a legitimate cultivar. And we'll just go a little bit farther through the nursery here. I'm an aloe enthusiast. This time of year is not when aloes are blooming for the most part. They bloom mostly in the wintertime. These plants here, that's a new phenomenon called a Mangabe. It's a cross of a Manfreda and agaves. It didn't even exist 15, 20 years ago. We've created this new intergeneric species here. They're really wonderful plants. That's Mangabe freckles and speckles. This is Mangabe bloodspot right here. This is something, it's actually, believe it or not, that's about a $250 plant that's not even a foot across. That's a terrestrial bromeliad called a Deuteroconia. And they just grow so big they swallow their pods. I have a great picture of a huge one in my Under the Spell of Succulents books. We're into the shade now. I don't know if the picture looks better in the shade. There's some variegated agaves. There's a lot of collectors of particular things, and variegated agaves have become really popular lately. My book I'm working on now with a friend is going to be about agaves. And what I really want to show you, I'm sure many of you have seen these. These are the crested plants. This is Cactus geometrizans crested form. In the regular form, it looks like a regular columnar blue cactus. But the meristem just kind of spirals out into this weird fan shape for reasons kind of unknown, but when it happens, we propagate them into more plants. And the crested plants, or the brain cactus, is a common term, are very popular amongst collectors. This is a plant I think everybody should have. I think the signal is going to fade here, just to show you real quickly. It might fade, but that's the top of the nursery. That's 101. I'm right at the north end of Solana Beach on the Coast Highway. There's some collector cactus right here. These are called gymnopoliciums. They're old. They're about cantaloupe size, which means they're probably 20 years old. There's another one of those Deuteroconias. Some more flats of this various cactus agaves. This is an agave here that was not even available until recently. And my friend did this particular cross of two very nice agaves. So this is the first generation. We don't even know what a large one looks like yet. So there's a lot of new plants coming on the market. Those are little baby Aeonium sunbursts. Some of them are cresting. Working my way back to the office now. That's a Deuteroconia lawrenceana, a larger form. I do carry some Tillandsias, air plants, not a lot, but generally people that like Cactus Succulents are fans of the air plants as well. Oh, here's one more thing I probably should show you. This is the African bonsai. It's got a terrible Latin name. It's called Tricho Diadema Bulbosum, but it makes a beautiful bonsai. I don't have a lot to show you now, but some of these succulents really lend themselves to bonsai. You see this lacy tree right here? That's a Madagascar plant called an Opercularia, and that will turn into a gorgeous bonsai over time, or at least suggestive of bonsai. Some various blue agaves. There's a lot of varieties of blue agaves. And we're going to make a slow turn back into the office here. Oh, by the way, this is my little man cave where I spent the last 28 years of my life. Some people think it's a pathetic office, although more often than not, people think it's kind of a cool, they wish they had an office like that. Does anyone have any questions about what we just saw? Let me show you the books real quickly for those of you that haven't seen them. This is Under the Spell of Succulents. This is the first book that I did. It's about the whole hobby. That's what the cover is supposed to look like. This is the cover after a couple years outdoors in the sun, but the interior is the same. And this book just kind of gives you an overview of the whole succulent hobby. There are photos for primarily of plants in habitat, in cultivation as opposed to habitat. So these are photos that I mostly took about growing succulents here in California. I give you tips on how to grow them. I talk about growers and collectors, specialty niches. They're very visual, but the text is good. Whenever someone buys one, I tell them, after you look at the pictures, please read the words. There's good words in there, mostly all in the right order. My hope with this book was that if it did well enough, I'd be able to do a second one on aloes and agaves because I could only dedicate about 10 pages to aloes and 10 pages to agaves in that book. And it did well enough that I was able to do this book here on aloes and agaves, which was out of print for a while. I did reprint it a few months ago. This one gives you a pretty good tour. What was 10 pages on aloes in the previous book is now over 150 pages on aloes. Most that you're likely to find in cultivation with some habitat photos. And then towards the second half of the book, we get into agaves. And I do have some of their related plants, Bocarnias, yuccas, nolinas, things like that towards the end of the book. That one did well enough that I decided to keep the ball rolling. This one here I'm out of. I would need to reprint this. I just found out that my printer in Singapore is about to go out of business, so I need to order reprints quick. This is soft succulents. This one covers all the aeoniums and echeverias and the softer non-spiny plants that it truly is what a lot of people, when you mention succulents, that's what a lot of people are thinking about, is this kind of stuff. And you know, we in the business love this too, although it probably wasn't the first thing that, you know, really brought us into this world. We kind of like the weird, freaky, spiny stuff. So that's the third book. And then the fourth and final book at this stage is my spiny book. And this covers the spiny critters, the cactus, cactus family, euphorbias. I think I start here with euphorbias, which are primarily African succulents that look a lot of them look like cactus. Then into the cactus. And then we get into some of the related spiny critters, Pachypodiums, Madagascar palms, Aloadias.
Hey, maybe.
What's that? You have a question? Oh, thought I heard something. So those are the books that I've done to date, and Sunbelt has been great about helping me get those books out to the larger public. Kind of strange seeing myself on the computer here. I've been masked up for the last 6 months. I grew facial hair out of boredom over the past couple of months. I'm going to go ahead and put together a succulent bowl for you guys now, if you like.
Andrew has another question. Has the hobby increased in popularity over the past few years, and especially during the pandemic? I'm in San Francisco and just started a few months ago, and I'm pretty hooked on it.
Yeah, well, yeah, the name of my first book is Under the Spell of Succulents, because that's what happens to you. You get caught up in it. Yeah, it's been growing in popularity for the last 10 or 15 years. The plants I just showed you, I'd say that about 70% of what I just showed you didn't even exist in cultivation in the early 90s when I started the nursery here. There have been so many new introductions, new crosses, new hybrids, new species. And we seem to have reached kind of a critical mass just driving around. San Francisco, I've been up there quite a bit lately too, and all over California. You see more succulents in the landscape. You see them as potted plants in yards and commercial applications. That there's just a general awareness now of succulents. I used to, when people would call the nursery, I answered Solana Succulents, and it was the wrong number. I'd get giggled sometimes because the word succulents kind of cracked people up. But I think everybody knows what succulents are now, which perhaps I should mention. Succulents are plants that store water in their leaves, stems, or bodies, you know, for dry time. So all cactus are succulents, not all succulents are cactus. But yeah, they're way more popular now. We've been on the leading edge of this for quite a while. And the pandemic, surprisingly, my first couple of weeks of the pandemic, I did close like I was supposed to, but I kept getting emails and calls. When's the nursery going to open? Because people were stuck home and they wanted to play with plants. So we all masked up, and the nursery business has, in general, been doing really well through this whole pandemic. We've all had.
Garrett, sit up.
I think somebody's got their volume on, but they're not talking to us.
Okay. So yeah, we've all done really well during the pandemic, and in general, succulents are more popular than ever. If you're up in the Bay Area, you probably know these places already, but the two places to visit to really see gorgeous succulent plants are the Berkeley Botanic Garden and the Ruth Bancroft Garden in Walnut Creek is fantastic. I'm familiar with I know the curator real well up there, and boy, they've got wonderful plants up there. Down in Southern California, LA has the Los Angeles Arboretum, and the Huntington Library and Gardens are two world-class places to visit. There's Lotus Land in Santa Barbara, an amazing place. So there's a lot of wonderful botanic gardens. In San Diego, we have the San Diego Botanic Garden in Balboa Park, and the Zoo and Wild Animal Park are wonderful places to see these, if you want to see what they look like big, and nurseries too. anytime, if any of you have questions as we go, please hop on in. So for those of you that do succulents, you can do them in the ground or you can do them in pots. If you do them in pots, generally a low bowl is kind of a cool way to go. This is kind of an unusual one. It's kind of gold colored. I like this one. And succulents need drainage. So you have to have a hole in the pot. And if you don't have one, you can get a ceramic drill bit to drill a hole. The main things that you need to know with succulents, you need to have a pot with drainage. You need to use a cactus mixed soil. I'm going to show you in just a minute. They need really good light. These are outdoor plants. They only work indoors if it's like window plant right next to the window, direct sun through the window on the plant for a couple hours a day minimum. If they're over here away from the window, they're going to live, but they're going to stretch, they're going to lose their color. So really think of these as outdoor patio plants more than indoors, unless you have that really sunny, hot, bright window. So a lot of people, they should have a big drainage well like this. Some folks are worried about the dirt falling out. So what I do, you can't put a screen in. I just take a piece of newspaper and just cover the whole piece of newspaper. By the time the newspaper decomposes, soil's not going to fall out of the bottom of the pots. That kind of works to kind of keep the soil in. Cactus mixed soil, you should get a cactus or cactus and succulent mix. And let's see if I can make this down. You can see, I'm going to show you the bowl better here. It should have a lot of the white stuff in it, pumice and perlite. It's basically like a regular potting mix, but it should have a lot of the white stuff, pumice or perlite, to help it with various organic stuff. Everyone's got their own formula. There's a brand called EB Stone. It used to be available at Armstrong's, but I don't think they carry it anymore. You might have to track it down, but EB Stone makes a very good cactus and succulent mix. All right, I'm gonna fill the bowl about half full of cactus and succulent soil. If you have regular houseplant soil, if you buy a bag of pumice or perlite, you can mix it. So what you want to do generally on a succulent garden, a dish garden, I mean, you could do an individual single plant if you had a real specimen you wanted to put in all by itself, but most people like the idea of doing somewhat of a dish garden. Can you see it okay? Maybe I should.
Maybe a little lower.
Yeah, let's see if I can take this off of here. Does that work better?
Better.
Okay. So the idea, there's no really magic bullet on how to do it right, but generally you want a big plant, a medium plant, and a smaller plant. A group of 3 is nice. If it's a taller pot, it's nice to have one that kind of spills over the edge. There's a formula they call a thriller, a filler, and a spiller. A thriller is your tall plant, a filler is your medium plant, and a spiller comes over the edge. We're not going to do that here, though. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put in a taller plant in the back. I also like to do the front and back orientation. I'm going to break the dirt up off the bottom a little bit. This is a different kind of mix this grower's using. This is a type of I believe it's a type of variegated kalanchoe, which is the typical pronunciation, not kalanchoe, even though it looks like kalanchoe. That's going to be in the back of the pot. I could have used this plant, but I don't want to crowd it. This is a nice, really weird mutated leaf form of the Kalanchoe beharensis. That also could have been our tall plant. Then I'm going to use an aloe. This is one of those dwarf aloes I showed you earlier. It's got a nice tall flower on it right now, a dainty little flower. And just all you do is squeeze the pot and bust it up a little bit.
Jeff, what was the name of that potting soil you said? Was it
EB Stone. Yes, EB Stone. I think they're based up in Central California, and they make a lot of different mixes. I think palm mix and rose mix, but their cactus and succulent soil I've always liked. I normally get my own mix delivered here at the nursery. I get a big 10 yards, 15 yards dumped here at a time from a dump truck. I'm late on getting that. I'm out of soil myself right now, but that's EB Stone is good. Not Dixieline. Home Depot has what they call a cactus and palm mix, which is kind of a weird combination. I think that their mix is kind of rich, but succulents are pretty adaptable. They can get by in a richer mix. The risk there is in a really wet winter, if the soil gets wet and stays wet, which is what a cactus and succulent mix hopefully doesn't do. It gets wet and dries out really quickly. These things like to get wet and then dry out. Okay, so I have the aloe towards the front here. And then the third plant, I'm almost going to be running out of room here. third plant's going to be an Echeveria rosette. It's nice to have a secondary rosette plant here. None of these I'm doing, you can tell I'm not wearing gloves. None of these are spiky plants. See, this grower used a much richer mix. So there's a million different, everyone has their own formula. Sometimes these rich mixes work great in the greenhouse, but out in the elements, it's a different story. By the way, sometimes you'll buy a succulent from a box store or someplace, and even though it's a succulent, you bring it home and put it in the sun, which they're supposed to like, and they burn, and people think they don't like the sun. But the problem was they were indoors probably in a low light situation for weeks or months, and they kind of they got used to that. And you all of a sudden move it out to the sun and they can burn because they got used to the lower light. So you have to slowly acclimate them sometimes into stronger light. So this is kind of a densely packed bowl, but that's a nice little thing that could sit on your front porch, and all these could live together in harmony for a year, 2, 3 years before they got so full that's maybe one of them wins out, or you have to cut something back a little bit. I'm not going to pour gravel in it right now, but you can pour a little top dressing, or you can, for example, you can put a nice rock in the front too. If you want to kind of play around with making it look a little bit more natural, you can put rocks or top dressing in to kind of finish the look. And now I'm going to do one more bowl that's going to be kind of a smaller, more of a cactus-oriented succulent bowl. And again, if any of you have any questions, hop on in. So this is about half the size of that previous bowl. And I'm going to put a little cactus mix on the bottom here. This one, that last bowl was a lot of big floraceous stuff that really kind of grows a little bit faster. This is going to be more of almost a bonsai cactus kind of a look. This is a Cirrus peruvianus rojo or monstros. It's a little dwarf kind of a mutant, sort of like cresting. And look at this, I'm touching this without even wearing gloves because they're really not very sharp. It's almost a soft kind of a spine or needle on these. A lot of plants get a bad rap of being spiny when they're really not. Most aloes can't even draw blood. Well, most of them, they look like they have serrations, and the serrations are really almost nothing. So you kind of bust up the root ball a little bit. You don't need all that 6 inches of soil that came with it. Again, I'm going to make a front and back orientation. So we're going to put this in the back. Maybe you that have followed Deborah Baldwin. She does a lot of these videos. I don't do videos quite like she does, but she has a lot of videos on putting together dish gardens. Now this is a spiny cactus. Look at this. I can even hold this one too if you're gentle about it. One thing I've learned about gloves is gloves give you a false sense of security, and a lot of cactus mines go right through gloves. So I tend to, sometimes it's really spiny, I'll just use a pot and kind of do this kind of a number to move it around. It's a little mammillaria, I believe. It looks like a little dwarf version of a bigger plant.
Jeff, if you were doing a deeper pot, would you use rock in it?
No, that's a good question. Yeah, if you have a big deep pot, succulents are shallow rooted. They don't need to, the roots don't need to go all the way to the bottom of the pot, although eventually they will. I tend to fill the whole pot up with cactus mix or succulent mix, but the bottom half or bottom third, if it's a really big pot, could be gravel. It could be popcorn packing peanuts. It could be almost anything, because the plants are really going to, for the most part, inhabit that top, foot of soil. But I tend to just use cactus soil through the whole pot. And instead of the broken pieces of shards of terracotta, I generally go with that torn paper that I just showed you. Now, this is a spiny one, but I'm just handling it carefully. Once you get it out of the pot, you can hold it from underneath. This is a red spined Ferro cactus. It's a little bit like a golden barrel, but it has really pretty red spines. As they get bigger, the red just glows when the sun's behind it. So here's a little troika. I'm actually going to put in the fourth plant just for the heck of it this one here. So these are all true cactus in the cactus family here. This is a little Medusa Euphorbia. These are African plants that are succulents. They're not cactus, but they're compatible. And let's see what this looks like in here. Euphorbias have the white sap. Those giant trees I showed you in here, those are also euphorbias. They have a reputation of being poisonous. Poinsettias are euphorbias too, but it's kind of overblown. I mean, most people will not have any reaction touching them unless you have a latex allergy, which you have to be, and you'll never take more than one little taste. And internally, you're never gonna, it's not gonna happen. But the sap is pretty caustic on the eyes. So if you get the white euphorbia sap on you, wash your hands good, because even if it dries on your hands later on, if you rub your forehead or something, it can drip into your eyes. So be wary of that white caustic euphorbia sap. Putting this in does give you a little bit of a different feel. It kind of softens the bowl up a little bit, so it's not all hard spiny guys. Okay. So here's a little more of a little cactus kind of bowl. And all these, again, they could live together for a couple of years, but there's a point where you do have to repot certain things if they get too big. And sometimes a plant dies, even a succulent can die. These are not generally buggy plants if they're outdoors in good, strong sun, but you can occasionally get mealybugs or aphids on these. If you do, you spray them with whatever you're comfortable using. You could use neem oil, which is pretty benign, or soapy water, or alcohol water, or something that actually has some poison in it. They're not bug proof, but they're not as buggy as a lot of other plants are. Bugs will be worse indoors than they are outdoors. And then you water this about once a week in the non-rainy season. All this, my nursery, everything I have succulent wise, from about the end of the rainy season, sometime in like early April on through at the beginning of the rainy season, and maybe November. In the non-rainy season, I water about once a week. And once the rain starts on a typical year, I don't really water anything from November through March, unless we go through one of those really dry years or a dry month or something like that. You might water once or twice. But for the most part, these like to get wet and dry out in between on a roughly a once a week basis. When it's really hot like it's been lately, you can water 2 or 3 times a week, especially if you live inland where it really gets hot. So there's that guy.
Jeff, I have a question.
Yeah.
When you're transplanting, do you go direct to sun, or do they need a little transition sometimes to?
Well,
like, you're just planting. I mean, obviously, maybe some plants are more or better than that.
Depends on where the plant was prior to doing this. Like these plants I'm doing right now, they were out in the nursery in the sun. I just brought them here to do it, and I'm going to stick them out in the sun. They're going to be fine. But if like I described before, if you had bought them from someplace where you think they weren't getting full sun, yeah, I'd want to slowly move them into the sun as much as you can. Dappled light is ideal. You know, if you have some kind of filtered light or more morning sun only, you know, they don't need all day sun. And that, again, it depends on how close you live to the coast. The farther inland you go, the hotter things are. And the more you might have to protect some of these plants, especially the soft, too much summertime afternoon heat. It's surprisingly, if I were to pick up my nursery and move it to Phoenix or Tucson, 80%, 90% of what I have would just fry to death back there. These plants, a lot of them are much more Mediterranean than what you can grow in the true deserts. The cactus, like this bowl here, most of this would be okay in Tucson, but that first bowl I made, no. They could keep them alive there, but they'd have to have it under some shade cloth or under a tree and water them more than they thought they would have to.
Are you watering that when you do the initial transplant, or is the soil wet enough to start with?
I'm glad you asked that. I generally, the soil was kind of wet, so I don't have to right now. At least one of the pots had kind of wet soil. This time of year, yeah, you can water them immediately. Some people are superstitious. They like to pot stuff and wait a week and then water. This time of year, nothing's going to rot from watering right now, unless it was a fresh cut. Now, if you were growing something that was a fresh cutting and you stuck it right in the dirt, you don't want to water that. A cutting has to dry off and scar off. This time of year, though, a cut will scar off in a day or two. But the kind of stuff I did, where they had roots and everything, and you stuck them in a pot, they're ready to be watered right now. That you can start immediately. That might not be true. Maybe I wouldn't do it in December if it was a rainy situation. I was putting them outdoors. But for the most part, you can start immediately, I think.
Thanks.
Let's see, what else have we not covered? And we talked about soil, light, water, bugs. You guys have any other cultural issues about?
Can you talk a little about, you were talking about cuttings, and you said you didn't really like propagate a lot, but I'm trying some leaves and some cuttings, and like
Right.
you say, letting them callus over, and any tips you have on cuttings?
Well, my first tip as a nursery owner is support your local nursery and buy something you don't have yet. But
yeah. I
understand wanting to do your own thing. So yeah, I'd say, you know, over half of the succulents you can do from cuttings. For example, this Cirrus peruvianus monstros, it would be a crime to cut that up. But if I were to cut off little heads of these, I could. They would root. You let them dry for a couple of days. I always like to start plants in a pot of cactus mixed soil. Like if you're putting stuff in the ground, don't stick it right in the hard dirt. Get them. You put it in a pot of cactus mix. You don't bury it really deep. You only put it maybe an inch under the soil, so it's tall. You got to stake it up. If it's a fresh cutting, you'd actually let it air out for a day or two or three first, then put it in, just kind of screw it down into the soil. If you want to use rooting hormone or root tone, you can if you have it. I get lazy. I don't really use it that often. I don't think you need to. And then you put it in a warm place, like if you had a greenhouse, that's best. But if not, a sunny garden window or outdoors, getting morning sun, someplace pretty benign. Leave it alone for a week or two because there's no roots yet. But then start watering once a week or so. And then a lot of times the cutting starts to shrink because it has no roots. So it's kind of sucking in on itself until such a point as the roots start. And then it starts to plump up. And it could take weeks or months before you see the new growth. But you give them a little pull test to see if it's rooted. That's the kind of stuff where you're actually taking a physical cutting. There's other plants like the aloes. You can actually pull a pot. When you pull it out of the pot, you actually have little babies. You can just pull them off and they come with roots already ready to go. Nothing's easier than that. As far as starting from leaf, there's only a handful of succulents that you can start from a leaf. Certain calanchoes, a couple of the sedums and echeverias, graptopetulums. There's certain ones that if you take a leaf off and you set it down sideways, just sitting by itself, and you come back in a couple of weeks, you'll notice little roots coming out of the base of the leaf and little new plantlets. So there's some that you can do that with, but that's kind of the minority of these things. And some of them have to be grown from seed. Like for example, these little globular cactuses here, these mounting cactus. Well, there's nothing you can cut. There's nothing to start a new plant there. So these have to be grown from seeds. So growers have to grow these onto a basketball size and take 8 or 10 years for them to finally flower and fruit. And then they collect seed. It's a very laborious process. The seed is like dust, but that's what growers do to get like particular cactus like this and certain euphorbias and aloes that don't make babies. So if you're paying a lot for a small plant, it might be one because that particular one took a long time to actually get up to that size to market. Any other cultural questions you guys might have? Trying to think what I haven't covered yet. Although one thing I can tell you, you can read all about it in my. I kind of covered most of that in this book right here, in Under the Spell Succulents. In the early on in the book, I do talk a little bit about propagation, growing, the essentials. There's a formula with water. Our water in most of California is pretty alkaline, and it would be nice if it was a little bit more acidic. And there's a formula. It's changed over the years, but essentially it's a tablespoon of distilled white vinegar per 5 gallons of tap water. Increases the acidity and makes the water a little better. That's not the same as fertilizing, but that way, if you add fertilizer to the water, the fertilizer assimilates through to the plants better if the water is a little bit more acidic. So there's little techniques like that in there. And also I mentioned that nothing is better than rainwater. As you probably know, when it rains, that's when the weeds finally kick in. No matter how much you use your hose in your yard, it's the rain that starts the weeds out. So whenever you can collect rainwater, that's the best possible water you can use. Oh, fertilizing. Didn't talk about fertilizing. One thing about those of us that like succulents, we like being lazy, and I don't like to have to feed and fertilize too much. But especially if a plant has been in a pot for a couple of years, it would really benefit by a little bit of fertilizer. And there's lots of different ones you can use. Fish emulsion is good. You could use Schultz's Miracle Grower. Almost anything where the numbers are in the mid-range, it's 3 numbers. But then do it about half strength or quarter strength. Don't overfeed these things. I have certain growers that they want to get their plants big fast, and I can tell that they've been over fertilizing and they're all puffed out. It's just like steroids. It's not good for them. So occasional fertilization is good, but go on the light side and maybe only a couple times a year. We like being lazy. The most important thing with these is they're out in the sun, or as much sun as you can give them, and you water once a week, and they're in cactus mixed soil. If you can do those 3 things, you should have a real good success rate with succulents. But we still, if I walked around again, I could find you some dead plants out here. Even those of us that know what we're doing, sometimes plants die, but these tend to die less than a lot of other things.
I got a couple questions that came in. Hina said, sorry I came on late. Where are you located?
That's very important. It's called Solana Succulents. I'm in Solana Beach, which is the North County, San Diego. It's about a half an hour north of downtown San Diego. Del Mar is just to the south of us, a little bit more famous neighbor. I'm on 355 Coast Highway 101 in Solana Beach. I've been here for 28 years. My website's exactly what you would think. It's www.solanasucculents.com. I have all my books here if you want to come by. For those of you that want to have one, well, all my books except for the soft succulents. But if you want stuff autographed, I'm happy to do that. I don't ask people if they want my book autographed anymore because a couple of talks I've done, I had the misfortune of asking someone, "Would you like this autograph?" And they said, "No, thank you." So that shut me down from my ego. So that shut me down from asking. But if you want an autograph, I'd be happy to do it. Yeah, I'm closed on Mondays and Tuesdays. Today is one of my closed days. I'm in here doing this with you guys. I do appreciate the opportunity. Does anybody else have any other questions?
The other question was, hello, I didn't hear when you talked about it, but how often do they need to be watered after planted in a pot?
Generally once a week is on everything. I mean, once a week watering is about right for succulents. I know people that water 2 or 3 times a week, and if they're out in the sun in inland warm parts of the county or the state, they can handle more than once a week. And if sometimes the plants look better, what it is, most of these are from places that get summer rainfall, which we don't. Surprisingly, all those plants I showed you on the tour of the nursery earlier, other than Dudleya's, none of these are native. They're all from Africa. The really cool stuff's from Africa, but Mexico and Central America, or in South America, are where a lot of these plants are from. And a lot of those are places that do receive summer monsoon rains that we almost never get here in California. So even though they're low water plants, when they do get water, it's usually in the warm time of the year. So what that means is that they survive our cold, wet winters, but with the exception of aloes that love that. But for most of these, they really would prefer this once a week watering in the non-rainy season. So you can take a vacation for a month for most of these in the middle of summer, and they're not going to be dead, but when you come back, they're going to be a little bit shriveled. So you shoot for once a week, and you can even go 2 or 3 times a week in really hot weather, and you can also ignore them and go a couple weeks without, and you're probably not going to have any problems.
Andrew had another question. Do you think the soil measurement tools are worthwhile?
Soil measurement tools? I'm not sure what you mean.
The little one you stick in the ground to show you how the moisture
Oh,
level.
the moisture meter, the moisture indicators. Truthfully, I've never used one. I have customers that like them. I'm more of a, seat of the pants kind of grower. I just kind of look at it and feel it, and I can tell by looking at the plant if it's kind of shrivelly. It probably is worthwhile if you want to try it, but I've never felt that I needed to use one myself.
All right, Hina had another question. Any plants that are better suited for an indoor terrarium?
Plastic. These plants, I believe, my kids, we years ago we went to the reptile thing, and we had some bearded dragons, and we had some nice little terrarium, and I tried to get succulents in there. And if the animals didn't kill them, just that light is not good, and there's no airflow. And if you get if bugs come in with a plant that you didn't see, the bugs go crazy when they're in indoor terrarium. So sadly, I don't really recommend these as indoor terrarium plants, and I don't recommend them as indoor plants in general unless you have that hot, sunny window that everything else you put in that window bakes to death. Succulents are okay there, but sadly, they're just not great for terrariums or indoor like offices. I've never put the sign up, but one of these days I think I should need to put a sign up in front saying, attention, don't consider these as indoor plants, because I'll have people, I'll put together a little dish garden like this, and I should have asked them first. I said, where are you going to put this? And they said, on my office desk. And I go, no, don't, because sadly, they don't work in that situation. They do make really good plastic fake succulent dish gardens now. I used to be against those. I've come around and I've evolved. I think that they're fine. Rather than sending all these guys to their certain death, if you really want them indoors, get one of those good fake ones. Some of them are so good, I've got to actually touch them to see that they're fake. I can identify them by genus and species. They've done a good job of making fake succulents. So that's what I'd recommend for indoors. Any other questions?
Jeff, I'm going to be down in Palm Springs at the end of September. Any recommendations? Or I know there's that Morton garden. I don't know if they're open.
Yeah, Morton's they should be open. That's been there. It's a family operation since the 30s. They've been there for a long time. It's a neat old hacienda. It's a neat estate. There's several other nurseries there. There's just regular retail nurseries that are good. There's the Desert Botanic. No, it's called the. It's in Palm Desert. It's a botanic garden / zoo.
Jeff, I'm Gail.
The Living Desert.
I live in Palm Desert. Yeah, and it's the Living Desert.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's the place.
And it does have actually tons of beautiful succulents.
Yeah. Apparently they closed their nursery there. They had an on-site nursery that's not open anymore. It surprised me. But you would
The
go to
adenium section is open.
Yeah.
Okay.
They have a section with just adeniums.
Oh, really?
Also, if you want to drive up to Morongo, they have a darling little cactus and succulent nursery up there on the right-hand side of the road.
Yeah, they've been there a long time too. That's a very old established place. Also,
Yes.
there's a place that I have not been there myself yet called Sunnylands in Palm Springs or Palm Desert.
Oh, not to be missed.
Yeah,
Absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, I hear that's wonderful. I do want to see that. And also, if you really want to see desert plants in Phoenix and Tucson, I go out there about once a year to give talks to the cactus clubs out there. Tucson has all the great nurseries. They've got some great cactus and succulent nurseries. They've got a couple desert gardens out there. The Arizona Sonora Desert Museum Garden is wonderful, and also Tahona Chul in Tucson. The really gem is up in Phoenix. It's the Desert Botanical Garden, I think it's called, up in Scottsdale in Phoenix. Is just wonderful. You know, if you're like me, you never go in the summertime. You go there from between November and March or April. But those are beautiful places. That's where you'll see saguaro cactuses. You know, saguaros, the iconic saguaros, they don't really grow in California unless you're in the high desert. In the desert in California, you can grow them. They don't like it here on the coast. We grow these big euphorbias instead. But if you want to see some saguaros, you have to go to Arizona and to either Phoenix or Tucson, and you'll see some beautiful saguaro cacti and other plants that don't.
Tucson has the saguaro forest. There's a big, it's a national USA park, and you can actually drive through miles of saguaros.
Yeah. Although, you know, what's funny is some of the biggest ones are the ones that have been moved into cultivation. That are some abandoned gas station in the middle of Tucson because they got more available water there. They're just big, fat, branchy, crazy things.
Yeah.
And they really don't look like that out in the wild as much. They still get big, but some of the freakiest ones are just driving around Tucson or Phoenix. But those are great destinations to see this stuff. And also, I mentioned earlier that the Berkeley Botanic Garden and up in Northern California and the Ruth Bancroft Garden are really worthwhile visits. It's a fun thing to do if you're into plants. There's lots of great nurseries and botanic gardens to visit. Solana Succulents as well. I hope you guys can all stop by here sometime.
Kathleen, you can unmute yourself if you have a question.
Anybody else? Okay. Is there anything I haven't covered, Rebecca, that I should be covering?
I think someone might have had a question.
This is Pat Gaston, Patricia Gaston, and I just wanted to mention that I forget which society it is, but if you're a member of a certain horticultural society, there's like membership or free entrance to hundreds of botanical gardens all over the country.
Yeah, it's either free or discounted. Yeah, in San Diego, we have the San Diego Horticultural Society.
Yeah.
Also, you know, every town, there's one in LA, there's San Francisco has one. There's also cactus and succulent societies in all over Southern California and everywhere. And it's even if you're not a member, you should go to their annual show. You see great, crazy, wonderful plants. If you're in LA, there's, of course, this year there's no shows, but hopefully they'll start up again. But in LA, in the middle of August every year is the Intercity Show. It's the biggest cactus and succulent show anywhere. I mean, I don't have a single plant here that would qualify for that show. They've got incredible stuff. San Diego has one in Balboa Park the first weekend of June every year. So once life gets back to normal, I'd recommend you, if you're not into it enough to join the club, at least go to one of their meetings, and for sure go to one of their annual cactus and succulent shows. There's vendors there selling stuff, and the show plants are just, they look alien. They look like they're from some other world. Beautiful, beautiful specimens. Anybody else with anything?
Someone might have had a, Kathleen, did you have a question?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was your
Sure.
question?
Hello?
We can hear you. Oh, looks like she unmuted again.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Great, thank you. I had a large Aloe Vera plant, great, like a foot in diameter and 2 feet tall, several years old. A couple of weeks ago, it developed black spots on the leaves. So I did remove the leaves with black spots, which basically kind of topped the plant. And then I removed it from the area in the garden because I didn't want it to spread.
Right.
Should I be treating this plant before I replace it in my garden?
Well, you know, I apologize because I think you sent those pictures to Rebecca. She sent them to me. I was going to try to email you separately, but I forgot to do that. The black spots, that might be what's called aloe rust, which is sort of this benign, perhaps a fungus, and we don't even know what it is. It's very benign, but the leaves that get the black spots, those spots aren't going away. So you're right to cut those off and throw it away. And hopefully the new growth coming out doesn't have spots showing. There is a thing that gets aloes called aloe mite, but they make these great big, like, herpes chancres all over them. It's really an ugly thing, but that sounds like that's not what you have. So,
No, it actually did look quite deep in the leaf.
so the leaf was
So
contorted.
yes.
Well, yeah, then you might have aloe mite, which is an invisible little thing you can't see either. So you cut off all the leaves that have the contortion, the contorted parts, and then there's no magic bullet there. The true thing is you use a systemic poison, which I don't like to use if you really want to get rid of it. But what I do is I throw away the bad parts, and then I just spray it a few times. Oops, there goes my phone. I just spray it a few times with whatever you buy at Dixon Line or Home Depot or someplace that says aphis, mealybugs, etc. Just spray it a few times and see what happens. A lot of times if you throw away a critical amount of the bad guys that you can't see, they don't come back.
Okay. And what about like Captain Jack's spray?
I've heard of that. I've heard of it. I've never used it. I don't know. It's there's so many things on the market now. I don't really have one that I've always loved. I mean, a lot of people don't like anything that's not kind of organic, and like neem oil, I believe, is a little bit more organic. You know, I gave a talk one time to the Bonita Organic Garden Club, and I could not mention a single product without getting booze. So it depends on your level of comfort with what you're using. But if it says aphids, mealybugs, spider mites, etc. on the spray bottle, try it. And
So anything that would work with spider mites should work with this pest.
Hopefully, but that's not for sure. Another pest that's even worse that I hate is scale. You know, scale are like little barnacle things, and you can spray scale with whatever, and they're still there. You really have to get it sprayed and then get a little stick or a toothbrush and scrape the stuff out. It's not fun messing with scale. So generally, plants that are out in the sun and the hard elements are not going to be as buggy as plants that are being more pampered or sheltered. So if you're growing them strong and watering and feeding occasionally, you'll have less of a bug issue than a plant that's a little bit weaker. But we still have to deal with bugs sometimes.
Yeah, and speaking of scale, some of my epiphyllums appear to have scale.
Mm-hmm.
Someone told me that wiping, say, cotton and alcohol on the leaf would help the scale. Is that correct?
Yeah. You could use like swabs or toothbrush and alcohol mixed with a little bit of dishwashing soap is a pretty organic way to go about it. Okay. And that works too. It just takes you have to do it repeatedly. You can do it once, then you wash it off, and you come back and do it a week later, and you can do it a week later, and you kind of wash off in between. So you can try doing that too.
All right. Yeah. Off season before they bloom in the spring.
Yeah, those epiphyllums, the epiphyllums, for those of you who don't know, those are the orchid cactus, the kind of hanging cactus with their flat leaf, and they got these giant, beautiful flowers.
Yes.
I love them. I don't carry them too often because if they're not in bloom for that 1 or 2 weeks a year they're in bloom, they don't sell for me. So it's really a little special niche. But when you see how gorgeous those flowers are, they're worth it for that brief. Time.
I usually snap them off and put them in a jar because they're only good for a day or two, but they're well worth keeping the plant around.
Take photos. I have some other just gorgeous Echinopsis cactus in the springtime, and boy, when they bloom, they're just incredible. And you get a couple of days out of the flowers in those too, but most of the time they're not in bloom. But it's worth having those to see these, 10-inch iridescent fuchsia flowers when they happen. And some of the cactus have some of the most beautiful flowers of anything in the plant kingdom. But it's brief. I always tell people, like the plant first. The flowers are a bonus when you get them.
Yes. All right. Thank you for commenting on that. I appreciate it.
Any final questions? We're about up at our time limit, I guess. Getting close.
Jeff, a question on shade. I think it's like string of pearls is supposedly for not direct sun. Are there others that are?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Most of the stuff I keep hammering the sun thing home, but there's a handful that really do better with a little bit of sun. They still need a little bit. But if you have a bright indoor spot or a place outdoors that's just getting a little bit of sun, string of pearls is good for that. They can get kind of yellow in full sun. So that's one of the few that doesn't like full sun. There's Christmas cactus, the good old Christmas cactus. Those are very houseplanty in nature, and they tend to do better in lower light. I still think a little bit of sun is good for them. Although out in the off season, which for those in summertime, they get kind of red and droopy. This group of plants called Haworthias that are a little bit more low light tolerant, but it's a very small subset of succulents. Most of these, you want to get them as much light and as much sun as you can, but there are some that handle the lower light better. Any of you try to just pop into my head, any of you, I don't have one in front of me here, but a lithop, they're the living rocks. Are you familiar with those little things that look like little flat rocks? Those are one of the most difficult succulents to grow. And if you ever bring home a lithop, and kill it. You're in good company. We've all killed lithops. They're really wonderful little living stones, but they must get a couple inch, half an inch a year of rain. Where they're from in Africa, they just too much water. They just explode on you or implode on you. But most of these are fine, accepting quite a bit of water when it's warm.
All right.
Any other questions?
I don't know. I think we should
Yeah, it's about an
call
hour
it
now.
good.
I have one question.
Yeah.
I have a rickrack cactus and it has like almost like a brown crusting growing on it. Is that normal?
Doesn't sound normal, no. If you want to send me photos, my email is solanasucculents@gmail.com.
Okay.
If you want to send me a picture of it, I'll tell you what I know about it. I'll get back to you later after I look at it. But it doesn't sound normal. And sometimes plants get weird, ugly growths on them, and nothing you did wrong. It just happens. Because as good as our climate is in California, we have really an ideal climate for growing these. It's not the exact same as where the plants are from. So we might go through some little weird weather, Santa Ana or hot to cold situation in California. It's just not quite what those plants evolved in. So sometimes we get environmental stress that just happens, and it's nothing you did wrong.
Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. All right. Well, thank you guys. I hope if you're down in the San Diego area, you'll stop by the nursery sometime and check it out. I got a lot of weird plants in here.
Thank you for doing this, Jeff.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm gonna sign
Yeah.
off. Thank you guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye.